That was a mouth of coffee. Alright, and we're back. I was talking about the statistics that she came back with regarding the information age and my generation. My generation is Generation X, I believe. Maybe Generation Y, I cannot remember. I'm 35 years old. I was born in 1980, just to give you an idea. Everyone prior to my generation, my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation, have a, well, this is the way it's done, this is the way we're told. You have to, if you want to sell me something, you have to tell me why this thing is a good thing. However, with my generation and all the generations following my generation, we are in the information age, and we all have to be sold to differently. The concept is you have to prove it. All of us are in the mentality of Google it, prove it. And it's actually quite fascinating, really. The difference between my generation and thereon and the generation prior, our parents and my grandparents, is they grew up having to trust people, whereas with my generation and thereon, we grew up with the computer and the internet. Our first computer came to the house in 1995, and I was playing Sierra's King's Quest from 1982, 83, 84, 85. It was 1988 when I had King's Quest Sierra games on my Tandy 2000 computer on the DOS program, where you had to type C://Sierra games. Oh yeah, the good stuff. And within 10 years, we had the internet where we could prove anything. It was amazing. It was amazing. So now, we're all very technical. Our minds are wrapped around the technology. We comprehend it. We're very technical now. It's everything. We have so much information at our fingertips. A Wikipedia is just, God, there's Encyclopedia Britannica now available. There's just so much information. So, from part 2, I explained how what changed was they had this facade. They had all these things that they wanted us to see. They had the video cameras showing us what they wanted to see with videos, with movies, with news. They had posters and propaganda. And then behind it, in the art world, they capture what really happened. And then 1975 happened, well, 69 to 75, and they took the video cameras to Vietnam, and you got to see what was going on. And it took away their facade. They were now in a position where they could no longer feed us this information. But then we received the internet and Wikipedia, and we were suddenly in a position where we could Google and look up anything we want without them. I got to see, we all did, we all got to see the capture of Saddam Hussein. I don't know if you've seen the video floating around the internet, but I got to see him hanged. Somebody had snuck in their camera phone and videotaped the hanging of Saddam Hussein. Amazing isn't quite the word I would use, but it was an eye-opener. 9/11 happened. We all know what happened then. There was a video. I cannot remember the movie. It was a recent movie. I wish I could remember the film. The buildings collapsed in the film. And you see the people emerge, covered in white. You saw the cloud billowing and going through. And I had issues. My husband had issues. And we went, wow, we all know where they got their research from. It was a very brief scene, and it was very toned down. But it was one of those things where Hollywood pecked it. because we had seen it. So this brings me back last night to what has changed. And with all the history I've done, and with everything that I've put together, this is what I realized. Nothing has changed. Absolutely nothing. The problems that we are having now have always been there. They were there 50 years ago. They were there 100 years ago. They were there 200 years ago. 300, 400. They've always been there. And this is where it goes back to what Charlene was saying. We are at a position where people are starting to talk about it. I want to go back to Pleasantville for a moment. If you watch Pleasantville, there are stages. There's the, ooh, new things, a different world. And it's all about the sex and the rebellion. And then they move on to the next stage, which is the intellect, the books, and the education. And then it moves on to the next stage, which is the awareness, which is the what if. And now I'm going to put it back in here. And again, this goes back to what Charlene Jones was saying in her video. We are at a point, we are ready to step forward, start questioning. What are we doing about it? And this is what I want to talk about. I come from a family of abused women. And I didn't realize this. I didn't find all this out until recently. And the more I go through my therapy, the more everything is placed in perspective. And I step back from it all and I go, son of a bitch. I was 8 years old. And I walked into maybe I was 10, I don't remember, but I walked into a relative's house and my cousin was upstairs screaming. Screaming. And my mother asked, what is wrong with her? And my cousin's mother replied with, she was raped. Okay. As a mother, looking back, I went, at what point did that become okay? At what point did it become so normal that it's expected, it's not talked about, and we're numb to it? One of the things I remember hearing about is there have been school shootings always. The only difference is the TV is now here to report them. The world is small. The world is getting much smaller. I speak every morning to people from England, a lot of people from England, a lot of people from Australia. I speak to somebody almost on a daily basis from South Africa, Johannesburg. The world is small. And if there's one thing I've learned, I am picking up more English terms, more Australian terms. I am hearing words like being and irascible. Now that's something I haven't heard before. We are getting into a world where we have no tolerance anymore for closed-mindedness, for the whole world is becoming one large melting pot, which makes racism, hatred, and prejudice intolerable. We can't. The world's too small for hatred anymore. That's something I've been saying a lot to my children, to everybody. The world is too small for hatred anymore. You can't. And instead I've taken an attitude of, it's interesting. I love learning all the cultures. I love embracing them. My daughter, in fact, it's right here on my thing. See here, where is it? I have a piece of paper. My daughter came home with it. Here it is. Let me read this to you. Literally, my daughter brought this home yesterday. Please join us. Christmas around the world. Christmas Around the World Feast is being held on December 22nd in my daughter's classroom. Now first, my daughter's teacher has married a Norwegian, and this is part of it, is, again, we're looking at a massive amount of cultural mingling. To sample holiday foods from around the world and enjoy some festivities with your child. And there's another slip that says, if you have any contribution to a unique food from a different country, bring it in. I'm very tempted to call my aunt who lives in Israel. You heard me. I have an aunt living in Israel. And say, hey, do you have any Jewish meals that I can prepare for the holidays? But they don't do, I think they do, I don't remember what they do. I'm thinking Yom Kippur, and that's absolutely not it. Not Kwanzaa, help me here. I'm drawing a blank. But you know which one it is. Hanukkah. Yes, Hanukkah. So, I really want to call her now and ask, hey, do you have anything that I can prepare for Hanukkah? It's just fascinating. It's just, to me, cultural blending is just absolutely amazing. And back to what I was saying is, the problems have always been there, and the cultural mingling is definitely happening, and the world is getting smaller, and now we have all this information. And now let's step back and look at therapy and psychology. In the 1890s, Freud graced the scene and, well, made an absolute fool of the field, but he founded it, and he was way off with a lot, to the point where for 100 years people looked at the field and went, well, that's just a load of crock, but he was onto something, and to an extent Freud was right. He was the founding father. Give him credit for that. In the 1950s, there was a story, this is fascinating to me. My husband's grandfather had a son, one of his sons, came home from the war, and he ended up with PTSD, and he was in he dissociated, and he didn't have a trigger at that moment, but he dissociated, and when he woke up, came out of trance, he was about 50 miles out and had no idea how he had gotten there. He called his father, my husband's grandfather, and said, can you please come and get me? And he explained what happened. My husband's grandfather's reply was this: don't tell anybody. I'm coming to get you. Don't ever speak a word of this to anybody. And the reason why is because at that time period, it was considered taboo to talk about mental illness, and if you were found out, you were placed in a home. I just watched Drunk History, and I'm the kind of person, when I watch it, I Google it to confirm. Information age! So, yes, they are dead on, by the way. The language is great, but aside from the terminology the people use, they're dead on. And I looked it up, and the way they depicted the mental asylums at that time period, dead on. And I'll say again, take a look at Sweeney Todd, dead on. So, mental health, mental awareness for the last 100 years has been abhorrent. 10 years ago, there was a group of people in a very specific region that had mental health issues. Everyone had a therapist. It was the in thing to do to get a therapist, see who could get the most. Well, I pay $200 for my therapist. Oh, well, I pay $300. Yeah, I've got all kinds of mental disorders. And it became a bragging right. I mean, quite literally, it was a bragging right. And today, we're at a point where this is all about perspective, and this is where I go existential on you. I'm going to stop it here, upload, and I'll be back.